And good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery online critique group session. Today is Wednesday, December 15th, 2021. Great to be back here with you in a critique session. And today's session is an Ask Me Anything session, and I do want to jump right into your questions. Before we do, though, I want to mention we're going to be on another little break here. It's the end of the year and the holidays, and so we will not be having broadcasts for the next several weeks. Next week, of course, is the week of the Christmas holiday. The week after that, my family and I are traveling, which means the week after that, the first week of January, I'm going to be playing a tremendous amount of catch up. So it's likely that it will be the second week of January that we'll finally be back in the groove of things and back into the session here. So just keep an eye on your email inbox, and I'll keep you posted on when our next broadcast is coming up. So with that, let's jump right into your questions. In these sessions, I want to try to answer as many questions as I can, so go as broad as I can, but I also want to give enough depth that I'm giving useful answers. So we're going to work really hard to work our way through as many of these questions as we can in a coherent way. That probably does mean I'm not going to get to all the questions, but we'll try and get to as many as we can. So let's go to the first question from Joe in California. And Joe asks the future of using traditional art as NFTs. So this is a question that I'm seeing more and more about. NFTs they're on the blockchain. It's if you don't understand them, which I admit I probably don't have a full understanding of NFTs or the blockchain or what it all means. We're somewhat familiar with Bitcoin and kind of the craziness around that. And the idea is that you're supposed to be able to take something that is digital. With Bitcoin, it is a monetary value. With NFTs, it could be a digital piece of artwork or a digital representation of a piece of artwork, and you're not able to replicate or duplicate that. It is encrypted into the blockchain, and supposedly the fact that this is not replicable gives it some value. And we've seen some crazy things happening with not only currency on the blockchain, but also with digital goods and artwork and music, and anything that can be digitized can be put on the blockchain and sold and resold and supposedly create value. And I'm just not buying it. This may be one of those cases, you had all those people back in the day saying, oh, Amazon, that'll never do anything or take off, or Tesla, who's going to want to drive an electric car? That's dumb. Maybe I'm one of those. Maybe I'm a Luddite and just have my head stuck in the sand on NFTs. But as I interact with art buyers, and as I think about what art is and what it does and what it can be, NFTs may end up being something, but to me, they're not what I'm doing. With art, what's happening is that people are having I would almost think of it as a kind of primal experience. I mean, art goes back deep into our prehistory and is a part of who we are. And what that is having a creative urge. Some of us have a creative urge, and some of the rest of us admire that creative urge and the skill and the talent that it takes to create that artwork. And it's turned into certainly more than that, where we're having experiences visiting museums and galleries and having a kind of a sensory experience. And that's what my business is creating that experience, helping people take that experience into their day-to-day lives. It's not about the let me put it this way. It's not primarily about the financial end of the transaction. That is what the finances allow us all to keep doing this, but that's not what it's about. And from what I'm seeing with NFTs, you can't really enjoy the experience of the ownership of this thing. It's just purely a digital monetary representation of what art is. And I think there's a lot of feeling of a bubble going on here, where people are paying exorbitant amounts of money for something that is intangible, cannot be enjoyed. And more power to you if you want to do that, but that's not the business I'm in. I'm not going to get into it. I've heard some interesting things about artists taking original artwork, and that's Joe's question here, is maybe using traditional art as NFTs, translating them into digital representations and showing and sharing and selling. If it's something that interests you and you want to explore, go for it. I'm not interested in it. Our gallery's not participating in that. What I'm seeing is, we've just we're in the process of closing out a record year for us, which means we've seen more people than ever really wanting to have an art experience and to bring the beauty of art into their lives. And that's where our focus is going to be. So if I sound like I'm ranting a little bit, it's because there's a certain amount of frustration that I have felt in just trying to get it. I admit it, I don't get NFTs. I don't get what the hype is about. And and it's not for lack of reading up on it and understanding what it is, but it's just, it's not a business that I'm interested in. So Joe, that was a really long way of saying I'm probably not the right person to ask. The right person to ask would be someone who's an evangelist and a believer in the blockchain and NFTs, and they would probably give you a very different answer. And if it's something you're interested in exploring, that's the direction I would be going in, looking for advice from those folks. Let's take a question from Alicia, and it's a little bit more of a practical question, one that I'm I think, more qualified to talk about, and that is there a preferred time of year to approach galleries? I'm thinking during peak season, you're taking time away from selling to customers, and during off season, you might miss the decision maker. In other words, you put it very well, Alicia. It's a bit of a challenge, this thought of approaching galleries with our art and kind of thinking about when the right time might be. And I would say that, you're right from a high level theoretical standpoint that maybe there is some optimal time. But my concern is that if you're trying to hit that optimal time, you're going to handicap yourself into a position where you never approach the galleries. And so my answer to this is the right time is right now, whenever that happens to be. When your portfolio is ready, when your artwork is ready, that's the time to start hitting galleries hard. And those of us who have been here for a while or are in the Art Business Academy, you hear me talk ad nauseum about the importance of approaching a lot of galleries. Of really playing the numbers to your advantage and putting your portfolio out in front of as many gallery owners as you can. And so in order to do that, we just can't be fussing and fretting about timing. We really need to be working to get our portfolio out as broadly as we can. And so, then kind of flipping over to the other side of it and thinking of it from the gallery owner standpoint, you're right. There may be times when I'm a little bit busier, and certainly during our high season, just the total, kind of level of chaos that's going on in the gallery is going to be up a bit. But even so, we are not in what I would consider to be a high volume, super intense business. We're not like a fast food restaurant or even a hot clothing retail or something where we're making hundreds of transactions every single day and it's just nonstop volume. Yes, even during high season, when we have our highest volume of visitors on a typical day, that's not going to be more than 30 to 40 visitors in the gallery. And if you divide that over 8 hours and they're not all coming in individually, there are some periods of time throughout even the busiest day in our high season that we're just, we have a little bit of breathing space. The gallery is not constantly full. And so you can find time whenever it may be. Now, obviously, during the off season, I may have a little bit more leisure to having a more extended conversation with you. And so there could be some advantage to that. But you mentioned the flip side of that, and that is that, if you were to approach my gallery in Scottsdale, well, now during the off season, I'm not here. I'm in Pine Top, and at our other gallery. And so, again, you could tie yourself in knots trying to think your way through this, and I just wouldn't do that. I would just get that portfolio out, and even if I'm not here during the summer, my staff will see a portfolio and say, "Oh, this is interesting work. Jason needs to see it." I'll get it on to him, and we can work that way. And so, just go for it. Get your portfolio out there as broadly and widely into as many galleries as you can. Cindy, who was our featured artist just recently, asks, and I think we have some follow-up questions that kind of fit into what we were talking about during her session and some other sessions. And Cindy asks, has an artist ever submitted to you a video of their work? Turning 3D work sculptures into flat images leaves much of the piece unseen. I'm toying with the idea of creating a short iMovie presentation for my work. Thoughts? Yes, this definitely is an interesting idea. And as I'm now an advocate of digital portfolios, and a digital portfolio does present opportunities to present artwork in ways that maybe we haven't before. And yes, I have had sculptors and actually even some two-dimensional artists who wanted to show surface texture and detail use additional media beyond a photograph of the artwork. So it might have been video, it might have been, I even had one artist present 3D images. You had to wear glasses to see the artwork that had been emailed. So he had emailed me the 3D glasses, or not emailed, he had mailed me the 3D glasses and then emailed a link to the video to look at the work. It was fascinating. I'm not representing that artist, so it didn't work on me in particular, but I appreciate the idea of kind of thinking about, okay, my artwork needs to be understood a little bit differently. And, if I can find a way to give you a better sense of what the work is without adding too much of a burden when it comes to reviewing the artwork, then that could definitely be worthwhile. So for two-dimensional artists who have texture and want to be able to show some detail, my suggestion is that it might make sense in your portfolio to have your overview shot and then some detail photos of the artwork, or off-axis photos that show me some shadow and surface texture. And you wouldn't need to do it for all of the work, but just start to kind of give me a little bit of a sense. The idea is the portfolio is an opportunity to introduce me to your work and to give me a sense of what I might expect to see when I see the work in person. And so whatever we can do to do that, I think can be beneficial. Now with sculpture and three-dimensional work, certainly this idea of being able to show the work in the round and to give me a little bit of a sense of scale and the many angles is a good idea. That your challenge is going to be, okay, how do I then get that video to the gallery owner? How do they, are they going to play it? What's the format? Those are going to be a little bit more of a question, but they can be worked through. And certainly if you're emailing your portfolio to a gallery, showing them the artwork and then maybe links to your website with video could be one way to do that. And an interested gallery owner who likes what they're seeing may indeed go to that extra step. And I would just add that there could be some additional benefit to kind of gaining some expertise in creating these kinds of videos, in that they could get a lot of play for you on social media. Video gets a lot of interaction there. And so, it's not just that you'd have one potential application for this. You could send it out in your newsletter to your collectors. And video can be a great additional tool. I'm famous for saying on the other hand, and so here's another hand, and that is that it's going to take some work, right? Getting the video and processing it and getting through the learning curve is going to take some work. So we just need to kind of balance out and think about, okay, is the cost worth, am I going to get enough benefit out of the costs that are going into doing this to make it worthwhile? And I suspect most of us have maybe a little bit of extra time on our hands typically, at this point in our careers, where we can afford to do some experimentation and learn some tools and use digital tools like video to be able to expand our reach. So Cindy, I'd say if you're interested in doing it and think you could get some benefit out of it, give it a shot. I would love to see any video that you produce and be happy to give you feedback on it. And then, we could think about the process of presentation. Stephen from New York asks, I tend to work in series of artworks that are loosely based on big, for me, themes. They reflect how I think and process my experiences. The big things are ideas like visual music, ancient geometry, light, landscape. There's some natural overlap, but they might not be enough for marketable consistency. Consistency for me is how I come back around to the themes as time goes on. To make matters worse, I have both tactile media and electronic media. My process is idea and concept driven. How would you suggest I prepare a portfolio of maybe 24 images that reflect what I do? And so it's a good question, right? Especially, I think many of us maybe work and have different series that we're working in that have some distinct differences. And Stephen mentions that not only does he have some thematic differences in his bodies of work, but also some media differences, some work being created digitally and some more traditionally and tactilely. And so, this is definitely going to be a question. How can I create a portfolio that encompasses that and presents my work in a cohesive and kind of approachable way? And what I might think about is, visually, can I tie this work together in a way that allows it to have a cohesive narrative that works for a gallery owner, or that makes sense to a collector? And of course, speaking of it in kind of abstract theoretical terms here, it's a little hard to peg down, okay, what would make it work, or what might be the potential pitfalls of trying to create a portfolio this way. But just kind of speaking from principles, what I'd be looking for is, okay, if I'm going to create a portfolio of 24, maybe 30 images, Stephen, if you've got enough, you can go out to 30, and that might give you enough breadth in each of these different themes. And it seems to me that you'd have an opportunity here to break your portfolio up into chapters, if you will. Where each chapter represents a theme, and maybe you go ahead and have dividing pages in the portfolio that say visual music or ancient geometry, and so that you're giving a kind of framework for a gallery owner or a collector to understand that they're looking at some different bodies of work. Now, within that, I would want to be a little bit careful that as I'm working my way through the portfolio, or if I were to look at the first image in the portfolio and the last image in the portfolio, that they still have some element in them that helps me recognize that they were done by you, that they're cohesive enough that I'm not feeling like, whoa, this, they're totally different. That how could these have been done by the same artist? But if stylistically or in terms of the palette that you're using and the general ideas of your approach to composition, if you can make that case, that these works were indeed done by the same artist, then an argument can be made that, yeah, you could make that all work together. So I think what I would suggest is that it would make sense to go ahead and create your portfolio, put it together, and then let some folks see it. I would be a good candidate for looking at that portfolio. Shoot it to me and say, here's my portfolio, Jason, does it work? I can pretty quickly look through and give you a sense of, yeah, this is working, or, well, maybe this piece or that piece don't fit into it, and we need to think about that. And if you think about what we're doing here in the online critique group each week, that's kind of what we're doing as we look at an artist's work, is seeing, does it make sense? Does it work together? And so there are opportunities to get that kind of feedback, and you may have some people in your circle of influence, other artists or folks who are in the art world, that could give you some additional feedback, and we could help figure out how it works together. Easier to do with seeing the work than just talking about it theoretically. Okay, I've got a question from Alfredo in Texas that is not art related, and I'll just go through it quickly. that Alfredo mentions he's been following me in the blog. Bottom line, I'd like to visit Sedona for some time, and the fact that you're located there gives me some incentive to make the trip. Please give me your opinion, plus any other info about traveling there. So this is travel advice. I love to travel too, Alfredo. And if you've not visited Arizona, you're in for a bit of a treat, and I would encourage a visit here. Now, I will mention, you said Sedona. I'm actually not in Sedona. I'm in Scottsdale. People do confuse the two. We're in the greater Phoenix area, but I've spent good time in Sedona. And if you're going to spend some time in Arizona, Sedona is not a bad place to do it. I would try and during that visit, if you can visit the Grand Canyon, if you can visit the Phoenix, Scottsdale, the Sonoran Desert area, there's just some very unique landscapes here. And Sedona is kind of a great central location for starting some explorations of the state. You could easily spend 2 or 3 weeks here and see a variety of different landscapes, and not only unique landscape, but there are a lot of things to see culturally here too. A lot of galleries. Scottsdale is one of the biggest art markets in the country. Sedona has a lot of great galleries. Of course, we're the Old West, so there's a lot to see in relationship to the OK Corral and those kinds of things, which is kind of interesting. So I would suggest that, yes, it'd be a great place to visit. And if you come out here, be sure and stop in to our gallery and say hello. This question from Chuck in Massachusetts: how many pieces do galleries want from each new artist? How long do they keep unsold or undisplayed before releasing them back to the artist? So good question, Chuck. And let me say that with this kind of question, I can give you some ideas, but each gallery is going to kind of have their own approach to what they want in terms of inventory from their artists. But giving you my perspective, I think would give you a pretty good idea of how most galleries are approaching it. From time to time, I'll have an artist approach me looking for representation. And, I'll look at the work and say, it's just not a fit for us, at least at this time, in terms of fitting in with the other artwork that we're showing and, with our plans for the current season, et cetera, or not a fit right now. And the artist will say something to me like, well, would you want to just keep one of them to see how people respond to it and what their reaction is? And, I then have to explain, no, that's really not how I do things, and wouldn't make sense in the gallery. You're not going to come into my gallery, and likely most galleries, you're not going to walk in and see just one single piece by an artist. And I wouldn't want to do that for a variety of reasons. The most important one being that I need to give potential buyers some context to understand the work. Seeing one piece of artwork out of context can be a little bit disconcerting. I think I like this, I don't know, but seeing it in relation to some other pieces really starts to help you understand it. Starts to help build credibility for the artist. And it just makes a huge difference in the process of introducing potential buyers to a new artist's work. And so for my gallery, I'm very unlikely to display fewer than 4 or 5 pieces for an artist in a grouping. And that means I also need to have some additional inventory on backup in our back room, so that as artwork sells, we're able to quickly replace the artwork and keep that grouping together. And so when I'm bringing a new artist on, I typically want somewhere between 6 and 10 works, again, depending on size and format. And then, I want as work sells, I'm hoping that the artist is able to ship or deliver more artwork so that I constantly have that ratio. I like to have about somewhere between 1/2 and 2/3 of the artist's work on display in the gallery, and somewhere between 1/2 and 1/3 in backup. And so it's kind of a process, right, to keep the artwork replenishable by having some backup inventory. So that's, for most galleries, is going to be fairly typical. Now, there are some variables, right? How large is the gallery? How much storage space do they have available? Those factors are going to play into what the gallery owner is going to tell you. But during your very first conversation with a gallery that wants to represent you, that is for sure going to be one of the topics of conversation. How much inventory do you want to have on hand? Now, the other part of that, how long do you keep unsold or undisplayed before releasing it back to the artist? That's going to depend too. I know of some galleries that are very proactive about rotating inventory. There's a gallery we mentioned, Sedona. I know some artists who show in a gallery in Sedona that insists on having all fresh artwork every 6 months. So nothing is going to be in the gallery longer than 6 months, and everything that's coming in needs to be new in that 6 month period. That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of logistics. And I find that by having some art on display and some in backup, I can rotate images in and out and keep things fresh that way. And I will tend to keep things longer. I like to have artwork at least through an entire season. And I've had some artwork. We just sold a larger piece of artwork that had actually been in the gallery for almost 2 years. Now, during that time, it hadn't been on display the whole time. It had been in and out of the back room. But sometimes it just takes time and repeat exposure to get to the right buyer, or to have a buyer think about a piece for a while and then make a commitment to it, or to have the space done that it's going to be displayed in. And so your gallery owner will tell you what they want there. Now, the idea is you probably wouldn't want a piece of artwork on display or in the inventory of a gallery for years and years and years. That would be the other extreme. You just kind of want to work out the tempo of rotation that's going to make the most sense. But your gallery, follow your gallery's lead on this. They'll have a pretty good sense of what they want their approach to be. And of course, I'm very motivated to sell artwork. In order to keep the lights on and the rent paid and my staff, payroll flowing and all those kind of things, we're working to optimize our sales and our inventory. And so I'm going to give you a good sense of what we want in terms of rotation. So follow that lead. This from Patricia in North Carolina. Patricia's up here. Which social media platform is the best for selling art, and how do you present your work to its best advantage on that platform? So again, whenever we get questions about the best, I have to give a caveat, and that is that it's going to vary for each individual. For us, the best platform has been Facebook and Instagram. That's where we're most active. That's where we have the most followers. We use their ad platform, and the Facebook ad platform feeds to both Facebook and Instagram, which is kind of nice. You get a broader user base there, and the targeting is easier. But having said that, I know an artist who lives in Sun Valley, Idaho, who has built a very successful social media following and a sales base to her audience on Twitter. She got onto Twitter very early and built a huge following and has been very proactive there. And, it's worked very well for her over the years. She has multiple hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter. And so for her, that's a great platform. Now, we have done some forays into Twitter and have never gotten traction there. And just because Facebook has worked so well for us, we don't spend a lot of time on other platforms. But you might find that you have a more of a natural affinity to one of the other platforms. Maybe you're going to be the one who is the breakthrough artist on TikTok, and going to make your millions selling your art through TikTok. Could happen, right? My suggestion would be to go where what feels natural, and maybe also to kind of think about, well, where is my current audience, the current demographics who are following me, where are they most likely to be? For my audience, that's not TikTok. Or Snap, or some of these other platforms that are geared, or at least currently attracting a younger audience. we're with the, let's just say it the way it is, the older folks on the not as cool platforms, but they have been very effective for us. And so give them an experiment, play around a little bit and see which platform seems to make the most sense for you. This question from Liz says, recently at a prestigious gallery where 2 of my paintings had been juried for an exhibition, I asked their art consultant what was the reason my painting A wasn't selected over the other B and C. His response surprised me. The co-director and I debated quite a bit about this because we loved it, but it was too dark for our collectors. Is this a regional, seasonal, annual trend, or across the board everywhere, always, or is there no such thing? And I'm going to go with choice C there, and that is that it's really hard when we're trying to kind of think about people's potential reaction to your work. It is very hard to draw any conclusive findings about how people are going to respond to the work. And even if we could do that, my argument is always that we're fortunate to be in a very broad, diverse art market where you can find not only buyers, but serious collectors for, I would argue, any kind of artwork. So this idea that a piece is too dark, well, what does that mean? You know, is it literally too dark where it's blacks and grays and browns and the colors are too dark, or is it that the feel is too dark, or heavy or serious? And so for this, the way I would take this is that this gallery is saying, we know our audience pretty well. We know what they're interested in and what they respond to. And in our considered opinion, this work is not a fit. And they say because it's too dark, it might be worth asking the follow-up question in that scenario. Oh, what do you mean by too dark? I would love to understand what that means to you. And then kind of take their lead and say, okay, thank you for your opinion. I wouldn't be saying this to them, but this is what the thought process that would be going on in my mind was, thank you for letting me know how your gallery and how you see artwork. And then I would not let that change anything in terms of what I'm doing or impede me from showing the artwork to other galleries or potential collectors. Art is so personal and so subjective that you're just never going to be able to get some kind of definitive understanding of how people are going to see and experience your artwork. It's going to be different for every single person that sees it. And I would just mention that if you were to come into my gallery, and I get this reaction a lot from people who are visiting my galleries, that, oh, your art is so bright, it makes me smile, it's enlivening. That's kind of the effect that we have cultivated with the artists that we're showing. Now, that doesn't mean that all of our artwork is, I'm going to struggle to find the right words here, but light or unserious or anything like that. But there's this effect that's achieved with the combination of artwork that's in our gallery. And you can visit our website and get a sense of what that is. But we know that is an effect that we're creating, and more intentionally, I would say, because we found a resonance there that people who are visiting our galleries respond to that. There is a gallery just down the street from us that is very different. The artist who owns the gallery has been in Scottsdale, must be 40 or 45 years now with a gallery. And the word might be dark or heavy or serious. It's these sculpted angels, and you might call them angels or you might call them demons. It's a little hard to decide which is which. And I mean, it's literally, let's put it this way, Tim Burton would be very at home in this gallery space. It is, I think it's really cool, and it's a very different effect. And she's been very successful with that. She's found an audience that responds to that. And she has some other artists who, kind of create work that is harmonious with that look. And so I just would refrain from drawing too broad a conclusion from one response to your artwork. And I would never be afraid that my artistic vision doesn't have an audience, because it may be a little more of a challenge to find that audience and to build a following for your work. But there are people out there. I mean, we have 330 million people just in the United States and 7 billion people on the planet. You really only need to find a few hundred passionate people who love what you're doing, and you can build a very successful career on that. And so get that kind of reaction, get that kind of response, explore it a little bit, but don't let it be the driving factor in what you're creating or what your pursuits are. Okay, question from Terry, and I want to get through just a few more. We're running out of time, but Terry says, I work in 2 different styles, modern cubism, pop art. How do I identify galleries that specialize in showing these types of art? It doesn't matter to me where they're located, could be in the US or abroad. And Terry is in Illinois. And what I would say, Terry, is that certainly you could do some searching, some Google searching for galleries that specialize in cubism or modernism or pop art. And you may find some galleries that would be good potential targets for you, but I would be a little bit careful about focusing too much of my energy on this. Instead, well, let's put it this way. If you look at the art gallery market, what you're going to find is that most galleries are not quite as narrowly focused as what you're describing here. Most galleries are going to offer a range of work. They're going to want to have some variety. And so what you're looking for is a gallery that has a range of work into which your artwork could fit. And when you're doing that, you know, especially if your style is very bold or unique, you may need to even be willing to present it to some galleries for whom you would be the outer edge of what they are showing. So maybe they don't have any pop art, but they have some more contemporary work that's colorful and bold. And maybe the owner is saying to themselves, boy, we're having a lot of success with this bold, colorful art. And here comes a new artist with some pop art that is even bolder and more unique, and because of its pop art style would stand out. And they say, yeah, we want to go in that direction and try that. Again, this comes back to the idea that I mentioned over and over, and I've already mentioned it here today, and that is that we just want to put your portfolio out in front of as many gallery owners as we can, because you don't know and you can't know how people are going to respond to it. So instead of you trying to hyper target gallery, well, here's what's happening, right? Let's go back to the core here. I think, Terry, what you're saying to me is, I want to find galleries that are less likely to reject my work. And if I can find galleries that are really focused on artwork that is like mine, then the likelihood of a rejection seems lower. And I would say that's maybe the wrong way to think about this. I would celebrate your rejections, because the more rejections you're getting, that means the more galleries you're approaching and the more likely you are to have your artwork out there broadly. And so, you know, I'd be thinking about, how can I get my portfolio out in front of dozens and dozens and even 100 galleries, so that I can get to those few that are going to be interested and in a position where they can take my work. And I'm not going to worry too much about hyper targeting in this way. In other words, you know, I'm not going to limit myself to just the very few galleries who blatantly advertise they're interested in pop art or modern cubism. I think I've got time for one more question. And Clyde from Kansas City asks, what is the art market for different styles of art? In particular, what is the market for abstract art? I know that's pretty generic, but I'm curious as an abstract artist. So really, this is a continuation of the last question, right? And I suspect any artist here could ask this question for the type of work that they're doing. What is the market for still lifes? What is the market for contemporary Western painting? We want to know how successful we're going to be. And again, what I'd say is just be careful about reading too much into this. Like, we live in a very diverse market, and in fact, I would say that we're very fortunate to live in a time where diversity is the name of the game. If you look back at the various periods of the art market, and really a modern, developed art market with strong galleries and a broad collector base, it was starting about the time the Impressionists were painting, and galleries were starting to become more prevalent and more influential and giving more opportunities to artists. And then you look through from the late 1800s through into the early 1900s and 1920s and 30s and 60s and 70s, you would see some very strong trends in those various periods, right? There were the Impressionists that were selling, and then we went into the Surrealists, and eventually got into abstract expressionism and pop art and minimalism, and there were, during those periods, there would tend to be a prevalence of galleries in those genres, and you kind of see this ebb and flow as galleries adapted. And now what you find is we have more art collectors out there with more diverse interest base. And it's just not quite that way anymore. You can see just about anything. And even if you go to a very well-developed art market like New York, Chicago, Scottsdale, within that market, you're going to see a subset of galleries in a wide variety of different genres and styles. And so, again, I just don't know how much benefit we get out of knowing that the abstract art sales made up 23.7% of total art sales in 2021, and next year we're anticipating a 0.3 of a point. Those kinds of details might satisfy some curiosity and be of interest, but from a personal perspective, you're not living and dying by the broader trends. What you're living and dying by is your ability to suss out and find your niche. Where can I find a venue or venues that speak to a collector base and draw those buyers in who would be most interested in seeing my artwork and most likely to collect it? And that's where I want to put my focus. I don't need hundreds of thousands or millions of buyers on trend to buy abstract art this year. I really just need a few dozen. And so that is going to be my focus. That seems to be our theme for today's conversation, is just really narrowing in and focusing, and then using the tools that we have available to get to those buyers. I think I got to about half of your questions today, and there were some really great ones in the second half. So thank you to all those of you who submitted questions. These conversations are great, and we will have another one of these Ask Me Anything sessions a month from now in January, the third week of January. So if I didn't get to your question today, please hold on to it and resubmit it for the next session, because I do want to have those conversations, and I appreciate your participation. And of course, as I mentioned, we're not going to be here for the next few weeks as we get through the holidays and the end of the year, but keep an eye out for an email. Look forward to seeing you after the first of the new year. I hope you all have a very happy holiday season, that you get to spend it with friends and family and people that you care about, and that you have a great new year. I'm looking forward to an awesome 2022. I'll have some comments in upcoming sessions on what we saw during 2021, and I will tell you, it's kind of stunning. Not what we would have expected at the beginning of 2021, as we look at how 2021 has ended up going in terms of sales and growth and those kind of things. So stay tuned for that on the blog. Great to be here with you all. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next